Welcome to another segment of Health and Healing. Welcome to the 2020 Vision of Revelation virtual camp meeting sponsored by Allegheny West Conference. It's an honor to sit with my wife this morning, Deedra, and it's always a blessing to know that phones do work, even when you don't want them to.
Especially when you don't turn them off.
Well, welcome to Health and Healing. Today we are in medical. Tell me what we're in.
Ministry of Healing, and we're reading chapter 23.
Okay, good deal. I'm catching up with life today, all right?
It's okay.
Ministry of Healing, chapter 23. If you happen to have that volume, I invite you to turn to chapter 23. And if you want to know how you can obtain it, simply go to your Google store, or the same would be the equivalent for an Apple phone. Go to your store and download the E.G. White, and you can have that app on your phone, and you can quickly download this particular volume that we're reading from today, Ministry of Healing. If you're on a PC, or if you're on your laptop or on a tablet, you can actually just go to Ministry of Healing, and it will come up in a search. What are we going to talk about today?
We're talking about diet and health.
Diet. Well, does that mean we're going to have to go on a diet? Or are we going to talk about what we eat?
So, well, actually, we're going to talk about a little bit about everything. We're going to see how far we get through this today. Okay. So we're just going to start reading, and it's going to be a little bit casual. We're going to interject. We're going to talk about, how we interact with diet and health today, because this was written in 1905. Well, it was actually published in 1905. But we're going to read this, and we're going to see how this actually pertains to 2020.
I think that's going to be exciting, because
so.
I think what I found, and I think you have too, that in the church, people so often want to know, how do I eat today? Now, what's interesting is that, let me put this little caveat, is that people think that eating today is different than eating then. And that to me is what is so humorous. And in fact, food is food. But the reality is that we have to eat a little differently today because there's so much bad food.
Right. So they had bad food in 1905. They did, because the industrial age was just coming about. So fast for them was coming around, but not as much. People still ate at home for the most part, but they still had bad food. You still could eat bad food at home.
Can you give our viewers maybe an idea of what it looked like at that time when we actually see fast food coming into play? What are some of the things that you can think of right offhand in your research that was already being introduced as fast food?
So at the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, what was coming about, I want to say about 1905, about this time, McDonald's.
Oh, that was in the 50s. That was in the 50s.
That was in the 50s.
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola. There we go.
Boy, Deedra, I'm really worried about you. Okay. All right. So let's not go down. Let's not go down that road.
Wait. Hold on. Coca-Cola came about, but actually Coca-Cola came about in the late 1800s.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're redeeming yourself.
I'm redeeming myself.
Okay, good.
Let me go even further. 1886, I believe.
Okay. All right. So now she feels empowered. Okay.
But it came about in England in the early 1900s.
Oh,
so it was going worldwide.
Okay,
so we have soda that was being introduced.
Okay.
There were some other, fast food types, not like we see it today.
Sure.
But the industrial age was coming around. So they were looking for means of faster food production.
Okay.
So, but, they had unhealthy food in the home. Just because you cook in the home doesn't mean it's healthy.
That's true.
You put a little fat back in your greens and your collard greens, and
you've killed the dietary value.
You've just killed your collard greens.
What are some of the things the Spirit of Prophecy gives us regarding our bodies and how we are to eat?
Sure. So, chapter 23 is diet and health. I believe the first couple of paragraphs are the most important. If you wanted to stop there, you could totally stop. It says everything right there.
In other words, it's
but then
pretty
she
complete.
goes into detail after that.
It's pretty complete
It's
in
very
these first
complete.
two.
So let's just read this.
Let's do that.
Okay. Would you like to start?
Our bodies are built up from the food we eat. There is a constant breaking down of the tissues of the body. Every movement of every organ involves waste. And this waste is repaired from our food. Each organ of the body its share of nutrition, or pardon me, requires its share of nutrition. The brain must be supplied with its portion. The bones, muscles, and the nerves demand theirs. It is a wonderful process that transforms the food into blood and uses this blood to build up the varied parts of the body. But this process is going on continually, supplying with life and strength each nerve, muscle, and tissue.
Sweetheart, it says it all right there.
It does. But let's talk about the selection of foods.
Sure.
Okay. Would you read that, please?
Oh, you want to go further down?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Those foods should be chosen that best supply the elements needed for building up the body. In this choice, appetite is not a safe guide.
Okay, now that for me is the breaking point, because people are driven by appetite, and appetite is what propels us in our food choices.
Sure.
And appetite is formed within the character of values, if you want to use, I wouldn't use the word principles, but in the character of values early in our lives.
But let's give like a just an everyday, casual, how does appetite dictate our life?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question, because in our home on Friday nights, food is prepared for Sabbath, but it's not the food I grew up with. So because of your background, that influences your cuisine. But every Friday night, I have mental picture. I don't think I've ever even told you this.
Oh, no.
Every Friday night, I have this mental picture of what Mom would roll out. And this is what we had almost every Friday night. Not every, but almost. We'd have greens, baked beans, potato salad. Mom loved potato salad. Okay, potato salad. Mom would generally have cornbread, but then she would also have homemade rolls. Okay.
Every Friday night.
I'm sorry. That's how we grew up. Okay, and then we would have what else did Mom? Now Mom was big for baking. She would bake pies, and I would remember her baking the pies and actually putting them up in the window to let them cool.
Yeah.
Okay, because the oven was smaller then, so you had to kind of rotate what you were doing with your oven, you know, that kind of thing. And Mom would make pound cakes, kind of a lemon flavored pound cake. Now, out of all the things I've mentioned, think about them. The potato salad's high in fat, although potato salad in and of itself is not bad. The baked beans were filled with brown sugar. That's a problem. Then you have the baked goods. That's a problem.
Well, just because of the sugar.
Because of the sugar. And then...
and the fat in the dough.
Right. The only thing that was actually healthy, okay, genuinely healthy, were the whole wheat rolls. And Mom will say to me, because she's still living, she's 97, she will say that the wheat today is very different.
It's very different.
Okay, is that true? So let's give our people, our viewers, an insight into what that looks like. What does it look like that the wheat is different today?
We have a different wheat today. As far as I know from investigating, we have a different type of wheat based on the DNA structure of the wheat that they had back then.
Okay.
So,
and well, let me go a step further, because you may not remember this portion, but that Monsanto actually modified a lot of the grains that we eat on a regular basis, and it structured the chromosomal, or I guess you would say the molecular or chromosomal structure,
yes.
structure of the wheat, which is why so many of us are now wheat intolerant.
and I think we might have to say that's just here in the United States. I don't
That's
know if that's
true.
including
That's
in
true.
Canada, but if you go to Europe,
They
I've heard people, they can eat wheat, they can eat pasta, they can eat bread, and they have no issues.
more
They
specifically,
come back here and they can't eat the,
yeah, and more specifically,
same
they
food.
actually banned it.
right.
And they would not allow Monsanto's
Monsanto.
products in. So when you talk about being particular regarding, you know, what we take in, that's a critical piece.
Yeah, and there's a lot to it. And again, it's not just, you know, we have to look at our habits today. We're always on the move. So again, here it says appetite is not a safe guide.
Right.
How is it not a safe guide? So we look at our everyday life. You know, a lot of us, there are many people out there who do not cook at home. They eat out.
I do not understand how
No,
that
they eat.
works.
I've heard of people who do not eat, who have never used their oven or stove ever since they've moved into their house. And they
so-
eat out
so-
all the time. So during this COVID-19,
Yeah.
you know, I'm just, you know, they're keeping restaurants alive.
Well,
and
they actually are, because I think about Samuel and Christine, and you know, because they're working now and they have enough income.
The older children.
Yeah, the older children. Well, I'm going to tell you, I mean, they have no problem ordering food. I mean, Christine I was talking to her the other day, and she was talking about all the food she was ordering. And then when I was in Huntsville visiting, you know, Samuel, you know, ordered. He said, "What do you want, Dad? I'm ordering food."
Right,
And so
so-
they swing by. So this
So
whole
it's
concept of
ordering food is based on what? Your appetite.
that's exactly.
what do I
that-
feel like eating today?
And that's my point.
But here is something that's even more deadly. So, in this choice, appetite is not a safe guide. When you are hungry, when you've allowed yourself to get hungry, your stomach takes over your brain. You know,
Right.
and although you know something is unhealthy for you,
Right.
you want to, you know, quench that hunger pain that you have. I have to eat something quickly.
Well, that's
But
the
why
reason.
do you have to eat something quickly?
Well, because-
are you going to die?
No, but it's
Are you
it's
going to
driving
die?
it. No,
Your
no.
stomach's growling. Are you going to die?
No.
No. So
But I
we
want to. I
have
want
to.
to feed him.
I know you. Let me tell you, I'm not going to go into that. Okay. So I'll talk about myself. I'll talk about myself.
Oh, you can talk about me because.
No, I'm not going to talk about you.
Because I become a totally different person if I haven't eaten in about
my goodness.
in about 5 or 6
So
hours.
have you ever heard the expression like a man turns into a bear when he hasn't eaten? You know, he growls and everything. It is so true in our house. And then you feed him, and he's just like, oh, he's just so, oh, sweetheart, how are you? But before that, it's like, "Rawr, rawr, rawr, I need food. You know, so this is what she's talking about, because it's if we're driving home from work, and like for myself, my commute is an hour, so I know if I haven't eaten lunch and I have to drive an hour home, I'm going to be very hungry, and I'm looking for something. What can I eat on the way home? I have to tell myself, Deedra, it's just an hour. You're not going to die on the way home, you know. And then when I get home, I have to remind myself, okay, prepare something healthy. You know, don't just start snacking. Don't open up the cupboards and start grabbing whatever and shoving it in your mouth and eating. You know, just prepare the food that you know you're going to feel so much better afterwards. So I think that's some of the things that she was, referring to in that sentence there.
Well,
But
notice.
it gets even better though.
Well, it does. And notice this: through the wrong habits of eating, the appetite has become perverted. Often it demands food. So the appetite, the drive,
Right.
demands food that impairs health, causes weakness instead of strength. We cannot guide it by the customs of society. I think that's a critical piece,
Critical piece.
because advertising affects how we view food.
Oh, definitely.
And so it sells us on the idea that unhealthy food is healthy. It also sells us on the idea that fast food has benefits. It sells us on the idea that everything in the package is beneficial. And all of those things are a lie.
And they had that back in her time as well.
Well, they
you
did.
know,
They did.
You know, they had tobacco and cigarette smoking
Right.
and
Well, and
advertisings for that as well.
And at that time, physicians were actually prescribing their patients to smoke
Right.
as a assistance in lung issues and
But
that
she
kind
knew
of
that
thing.
was wrong.
Right.
So these are some of the things that she's talking about. We cannot safely be guided by the customs of society. So if it's out there, if it's on a commercial, if it's on a billboard, if your friends are doing it, if other people are doing it, that doesn't mean it's right.
That's correct. Be curious. Ask questions. Do the research. Don't just buy the package or
Right.
buy the product simply because it's being advertised.
Well-
Go bigger than that.
Let me just give this little insight to when I was growing up. So my family's not from this country, and coming into this country, it was a big deal to be an American, you know. So when my mother had me, one of the things that kind of dictated our diet was television. So commercials, you know, it's just classic immigrant, you know, you learn your English from a TV show, and you learn what's I'm telling on my family, so sorry. But anyway, so we ate a lot of what was on TV. So if like those horrible commercials on Saturday morning that they played as with the cartoons for, you know, the the cereal boxes filled with sugar, I was able to eat those every single morning. TV dinners, canned foods, those types of things, boxed foods we grew up with, because those were quintessential American food.
Well, and that's how we get into trouble, because
That was the customs of society.
well, because we stop processing, we stop thinking about what we're eating. I never will forget growing up. My dad thought he was helping my mom. He started, buying her Jiffy,
Oh.
okay? But Jiffy had lard in it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
But nobody, well, I'm serious. So Dad was buying it, and it was always on sale. You could buy it in a group, box 5 or whatever, and he would bring all these Jiffy boxes home. And so all of a sudden, Mom, somebody decided to get smart and read the ingredients, okay? Had piggy in it. And so all of a sudden, there's this an awakening in our home. And so then there was a discussion. What do we do with the Jiffy, okay, that we bought, and it's on the shelf, and what do we take it back to the store? I mean, what do we do?
Because you don't want to give it away.
Well, exactly, exactly. So that
again,
is
customs
yes.
of society.
Wow.
So the disease and suffering that everywhere prevail are largely due to popular errors in regular diet. Exactly
So
what we're talking
notice that before the invention of the creation, let's not call it an invention because it's not an actual product, it's a philosophy. Before the creation of advertising, which was built on Edward Bernays' book of propaganda, and that's something that I teach in a series that I do. Edward Bernays laid out a strategy for how the industrialists and how the company owners could actually position their product and capture the consumer's attention, and as such, get them into this routine of buying certain products subconsciously. So it became a strategy all the way to today, where things are placed on end caps in the grocery store, and how they're put on a particular shelf. The producers actually pay for that shelf space. So everything is positioned so that we will be drawn into a particular purchase. Well, this is before. She's giving this counsel. Listen to what she says. The disease and suffering that everywhere prevail are largely due to popular errors. Popular, meaning that they have become the norm. It has become, I guess you would say, societal practice in regard to diet. So, in order to know what are the best foods, we must study God's original plan for man's diet. So if we're going to study God's original plan for man's diet, then we have to put our lives back in line with Genesis. You have to go all the way back to Genesis, where there were no Pizza Huts and pizza inns and pizza this and cheese in the pizza crust and all of that. So why is that important? Well, there are no burgers or anything.
There's nothing.
Right.
French fries.
No and you love French fries.
French fries.
Okay, no, none of that. So what are we really learning about the Garden of Eden? We're learning that God had a grocery store built into man's environment, and they were on trees and on vines.
But here's the important part of that. Why did he do that? Why did he just put all that vegetation in there? Was it just random, like, oh, let's throw some greens over here and some grapes over there? And was it random? He knew, since he took us from the ground.
Right.
He created us from the ground.
Right.
So something very interesting, the elements that are in the ground,
right,
calcium, selenium, all those types of
Magnesium.
elements, magnesium,
Copper.
that are in the dirt,
right,
are in us as well.
Sure.
Okay, so we need those to survive. And where do we get them? So he put the plants there.
But what's the
But
obsession?
listen,
Okay.
The plants absorb
Right.
all those elements that are in the ground, and then we eat them.
But what's the obsession with protein? Because
So here's the thing.
protein is not.
You can get it.
The same amount of protein from your greens. God gave you everything that you needed in what he grows.
Run that back for our callers. I mean, our viewers, rather.
All the protein you need
Right.
can be obtained in food that grows out of the ground. For instance, the cow that most people eat gets his protein from where?
Vegetation.
The grass that he eats.
Right.
They don't feed him cow.
Right. So the whole.
So we are getting We are getting a secondhand type of protein. It is a protein,
Okay.
but it's hard for us to digest. It takes a long time. It wears down our life forces to digest it. And
Hold on to that thought, because most of our viewers don't really understand how food actually exhausts the body, draws the body down. It actually makes the body work harder. Therefore, it shortens the lifespan.
Yes.
So, okay, so go back to Genesis, and we notice that the length of the days or the ages of people before they started eating flesh food, which was on the other side of the ark or the flood, it actually shortened rapidly. It went from 900 and some years in general age span, dropped off to 600 and some years, and then began to plummet from there.
And the only difference is they started eating flesh.
Okay, so
in their diet,
in their diet.
they started eating flesh.
So what about eating flesh?
Oh, there's a lot.
I
What-
mean,
which is-
there's a lot in the whole structure of how flesh interacts with our body. But the major thing, and something very quick and simple to just say, is it takes so long to digest it.
Okay.
And the body has to convert so much of flesh.
Right.
It has to create the vitamins and the minerals and everything that we need from that, because it would easily be able to do it out of the plants, because
Sure.
the plants have all that.
Which is why they have
The-
fiber.
The meat, the flesh, does not have that.
Right.
So the body, God created us so amazingly, but the body is able to get that out of there, but there are repercussions in doing so. And that's a whole nother topic. But, that is in itself why we have to look at the diet. So let's just look at what God gave Adam and Eve in the garden.
Okay.
So he who created man, who understands his needs, appointed Adam his food.
Okay.
Behold, he said, I have given you every herb yielding seed, and every tree, in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. 2, it shall be for food. And that's in Genesis 1:29. So upon leaving Eden to gain his livelihood by tilling the earth under the curse of sin, man received permission to eat also the herb of the field. So that's just a little difference there. So before sin, they were only eating things that they were able to pick off and eat and not destroy. So, there was there were grapes on the vine. They would take some grapes. They'd walk a little bit, maybe felt a little hungry, and they'd, eat some berries, or, eat, I don't know if an apple was created then, they'd eat an apple. Whatever the fruits were, they would eat that. They did not eat vegetation that needed to be pulled up out of the ground, because
Right.
that caused death. So that only came into play after sin.
And so what I think is interesting is that we often forget that the original diet did not include vegetables. Vegetables actually
Well, they didn't-
terminated life.
They didn't create.
They didn't contain root vegetables. So
Okay,
potatoes,
sure.
carrots,
Potatoes,
rutabaga, beets.
Probably onions and garlic as well.
Onions and garlic. Well, onions, I mean, you can kind of clip the tops and use them like chives.
Right.
But if you needed to pull up the whole onion, those probably
Right.
weren't in there. Yes, I would agree with that.
That's very interesting. So when you go back to what we're reading from, okay, we're now at page 296. Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. These foods, prepared in as simple and natural a manner as possible, are the most healthful and nourishing. They impart a strength, a power of endurance, and a vigor of intellect that are not afforded by a more complex and stimulating diet. I think because we're looking at the last 4 minutes of today's program, one of the things that I would think that we should help people to grasp is that when you change your diet, and by the way, I do want to make this statement, it is possible to change your diet overnight.
Oh yeah.
This whole business of you need to gradually withdraw and change, that's bogus. Because if you went into the physician's office today and he said, you got to start taking this pill right now or you're going to have a heart attack, and you got to stop eating these heart defiling foods like these hamburgers and all that kind of stuff with all the cheese and all that kind of thing, would you drop it? Sure you would, because he said, if not, you're going to die. And all of a sudden burgers disappear and all that kind of stuff. When we hit a crisis point, we're always ready to let things go. But we don't think of letting things go when we're not at a crisis point.
Right.
But it changed when we make that commitment. If we add prayer to that process, the Holy Spirit will give us the power to make the step, make the change, and change our palate, change our taste. And I'd like for you to give we only have 3 minutes, but give your testimony very quickly about your addiction to sugar.
Sure.
So I have an addiction to sugar. So, excuse me, when I probably was 2014?
Okay.
In 2014.
It was.
I came to this crisis point where I felt like I was very sick, and I was always sick. So real quick, I decided to go raw. I ate all raw foods, nothing was cooked, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds. Basically, I went on the Genesis diet. And
But your body actually went through.
my body went through a withdrawal. So it was around Christmas, you were traveling for work, and I told the kids, I knew what was going to happen. And I said, children, Mommy, I'm going to go into the room. You have food to eat. Just leave me in there, because for about 3 days, I knew I was going to be sick. So for 3 days, it was literally 3 days, I was in there, I was having flu-like symptoms. I had fever, I had chills. I remember my daughter came in the room and she's like, Mommy, you smell, because that was all the toxins coming out of me, because I had stopped eating, fats and sugars, and specifically sugars. And I was juicing at the time. So all that was coming out of my body, and my body was reacting to it because it's an addiction, it's a drug.
It is, and I think a lot of us don't realize that the food industry is not based on you being healthy, it's based on them making money. So the counsels that we have in Ministry of Healing, and also the book Counsels on Diets and Foods, is really to help awaken in us. Also the book Temperance.
Yes.
All 3 of those books are a part of developing us. So I want to thank you for investing time with us today.
I'm sorry we couldn't get through the whole thing.
Well, we were having fun and giving you life stories and telling you how things are in real life and how we experience them in our homes. So I want you to know that every day at this time, you will have wonderful counsel given to you from the Spirit of Prophecy that will help you in your life, that will help you grow in your health. And I think that we should pray for our viewers at this time. Can we do that?
Yes, we can.
Father in heaven, I thank you, Lord, for giving us the opportunity to spend time with our viewers today in speaking on the matters of health and healing. Help us, Lord, to always walk by faith, but also by obedience.
Yes.
Help us to bring our lives in line with what you've instructed. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you again for allowing us to be a part of your family today and sharing with you from the Spirit of Prophecy those things that will help you to health and healing.